Yo, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy, Sports and Fitness Rants, and I'm back with another video for you guys, another edition. Please click the like button, subscribe to my channel, please. It helps me help you guys, help me get this information out to you guys. I try to focus, more or less on 80s and 90s basketball, just information, and a lot of the stuff that I talk about is off the top of my head, just off of memory, things that I remember from watching the games, and things of that nature, whatever. So in this video, I wanted to get into something really quickly. I wanted to talk about the aspect of playing 82 games in a season and how that has seemed to have gotten lost over the last, decade, 2 decades, last 20 years, let's say. The pride that players used to take back in the day for playing 82 games in a season, there was like a sense of accomplishment, a sense of pride, almost like when you were a kid and you had perfect attendance, right? There was a lot of pride in that for a lot of kids. It meant a big deal back in the day to have perfect attendance, whereas now, you see that even in schools now, right? Kids aren't going to school every day. They're missing days of school to go to Florida or something like that, or going on vacation, and the parents might take them out and miss a couple of days of school. Or if kids were, and especially now with COVID now, if kids are not feeling well, then, definitely not going to school. But before that, you notice the pattern. It was the same thing in schools with kids as it was with, professional athletes, and even people in working conditions, regular working 9-to-5 jobs. Back in the day, people didn't miss work, man. They came to work every single day. Kids didn't miss school. They went to school every single day. And now the world has kind of gotten into this slow, decline into like almost laziness, or some kind of sense entitlement, and I feel like it started, along the lines with participation trophies, right? Remember, 10 years or so ago, however long ago, maybe 20 years ago, people started giving out these participation trophies. If you played the sport, you got a trophy at the end, regardless if your team was garbage or if you even played and stuff like that. Whereas back in the day, you had to earn a trophy. Trophies were earned, they weren't given. So it meant more to you when you got the trophy, whether it was from Little League or some CYO League or whatever it was, Pop Warner football, you got that trophy. A lot of times there was a sense of accomplishment with these trophies for winning something. So it kind of, the way the world works, it's kind of bleeding into the sports now, right? Guys in the NBA, there's no sense of accomplishment for playing 82 games. It's almost now where players are almost like, why play 82 games? Why should I play 82 games, right? There's no point in me playing 82 games, right? People are worried about their brand. They're worried about getting injured, whatever the case may be. So you're starting to lose that, like I said, that sense of accomplishment and that sense of duty, where you want to be at work every day. You want to show up for the fans every day, and when you talk about playing 82 games in a season and you talk about a mentality to have, you immediately think about, old school mentalities. It immediately brings you back to those old school mentalities of just everyday folks, like I said, working 9-to-5s that would be there every single day. You could depend on these people. They were dependable. People aren't dependable anymore. You can't depend on a lot of these guys, man. And you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about guys like a Kawhi Leonard. I'm talking about a guy like a Ben Simmons. I'm talking about a guy like a James Harden. You cannot depend on these guys. Now, I'm not talking about their games. I'm not talking about their games at all. We're speaking about availability and being there mentally and physically. Obviously, Ben Simmons is not there mentally. I don't know what his physical issues are or whatever, but he's not there. He's in another world. Kawhi Leonard, he's not there mentally or physically. And I've lost a lot of respect for Kawhi Leonard over the last season, especially over this last season that just has transpired. Because in my opinion, Like I said, I'm not a doctor or nothing, and I'm not trying to diagnose this man or anything like that, mentally or physically. But from the outside looking in, for someone like me who's a more old school kind of person, I was in the military and things like that. I don't respect Kawhi Leonard and what he's doing because to me, I think he's full of crap, and I think he's a straight up punk, man. I think he's soft, and I say that he's soft in the mind. You know what I'm saying? He's mentally weak and soft, man. For a guy who claims to emulate Kobe and Jordan, the one thing he did not take from them is the mental game. And I guess that seems to be the hardest part for a lot of this newer generation of players coming up is the mental aspect. A lot of these guys are mentally weak, man. I mean, look at LeBron James, for example. He's got to be the most mentally weakest professional athlete for his caliber I've ever seen in my life, man. And, people will try to defend this guy and say things, about his toughness per se, quote unquote toughness. But there's been nothing in LeBron James' career that lends you to believe that he's mentally tough. There's nothing. Where's his mental toughness? There is no mental toughness. That's been the knock on LeBron his whole career. That's why a lot of people don't like him, especially this season. And especially the last couple of seasons, you see the nonsense and the weak-minded games that he plays with his teammates, with the coaches, with the fans. I mean, this was a man that once, after the 2011 finals, had the audacity to talk to the fans, saying things like, yo, yeah, well, y'all just broke and stuff. You got to live your normal lives, but I'm going to still be being. Like, who says something like that? Like, that shows you that you're out of touch with reality. If you believe for 1 minute that you're special because you have money or you have status, then you've lost yourself because it doesn't matter. You can be the richest man in the world. You can have you can be the most famous person in the world. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about who you are as a person. And and that shows, like I said, in that moment, that shows his weak-mindedness because he's not even strong enough to take the criticisms that people were giving him in 2011 for his failure, that he failed, right? He failed in 2011. And instead of just taking it like a champ on the chin, he had to throw out some nasty comments like that to try to make it seem as if you're not a millionaire or if you're not him, then your life has no value. And ever since those comments, I pretty much have distanced myself from being a fan of LeBron James because I was a fan of his early in his career. I wasn't a fan of the move to Miami, but it was whatever. But those comments after the 2011 finals, like I said, it showed a lot about what he was like mentally and how he feels about people, truthfully, right? But, back to the 82 games thing and the weak-mindedness of people, and this is what happened, right? We got into this load management era, and that's what we're in right now. We're in the load management era. You hear these young knucklehead fans, these kids who don't even know anything about the history of basketball, who've only been watching basketball for the last 10 years. They want to tell you about the history of basketball and about how these guys would crush the guys from the 80s and the 90s and the 70s and the 60s, all that kind of nonsense. And then, when you bring up toughness and physicality, they try to tell you, oh, so-and-so is this, he weighs this much, he's this big, he'll be fine in that era. If you believe for 1 minute that your size has anything to do with your mental toughness, then you have no idea what you're talking about. It doesn't matter if you're 6 feet tall or if you're 3 feet tall. Toughness of mental toughness is inside of you. What's in your heart is what's in your heart. It doesn't matter how big you are, right? Now, yeah, there are advantages of being bigger in the NBA, but that doesn't make you tougher, right? So you see a lot of these kids talk about, oh, LeBron would be fine in the 80s and the 90s. He's 6'9", 260, and blah, 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 and all this nonsense. What the hell does that have to do with anything? That has nothing to do with your toughness. That has nothing to do with your toughness. You're talking about, you're pointing out physical stats and trying to use that to defend a mental makeup of a person. It has nothing to do with that. Allen Iverson was a lot mentally tougher than LeBron James is. Meanwhile, he's like a foot smaller and probably 100 pounds less than LeBron James. It has nothing to do with that, right? Muggsy Bogues was mentally stronger than a lot of players that he played against. The man was like 5'8", 5'6", playing in the NBA. Think about the trials and tribulations it took for Muggsy Bogues to make it to the NBA at that size. You have to be tough. You have to have mental toughness, man, right? Like, you're telling me that a guy like a Charles Barkley, who still to this day is the shortest person to lead the league in rebounding, right? Charles Barkley, they say, was like 6'4", 6'5", if that. Led the league in rebounding, shortest person in NBA history, lead the league in rebound. You're telling me that was because of his height or his size? No, it's because of his toughness and his mental and his want to, right? His motor, his rebounding. That's why Dennis Rodman they say was like 6'6", and he was leading the league in rebounding. 6'7", Dennis Rodman was, right? Leading the league in rebounding. Way shorter than most of the guys that he played against. But he had the mental capacity to go to and want to get those boards. Not to mention, he was a smart basketball player, Dennis Rodman. So he used a lot of his IQ to know where the ball was going to bounce. If you hear him explain it, it's really crazy. But what I'm saying is that you understand what I'm saying, where I'm going with this. So when you turn around and you look at the 82 games in people's careers, people try to downplay it. It's not a big deal, but it is a big deal, man. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said, that shows a level of mental toughness with physical toughness, right? If you have knee pain, obviously you have to have some kind of physical threshold to deal with that pain. Or if you have ankle injury, or hand injury, or shoulders bothering you, or an elbow, you do have to have some level of pain threshold, right? But a lot of times a pain threshold is mental. It's mental, right? Like the initial pain is physical, but to deal with that pain continuously becomes a mental challenge. You have to learn how to block it out or deal with it, or, what do they say, compartmentalize things, right? So someone like a Kobe Bryant, for example, who tried to play 82 games a season as much as he could, I think he only played 82 games maybe, 3 or 4 times in his career, but the man dealt with multiple injuries at a time. And we're not questioning Kobe Bryant's mental toughness or his physical toughness, because he proved it. Kobe proved it. He played, most of his career with injuries. People don't realize that, but especially the large part, second half of his career, those last 10 years, that dude dealt with significant injuries continuously and still was able to go out there and perform, and he didn't load manage or miss games. He could have sat out probably a lot of games, but he didn't. He played. Because that's who he was. And he got that from Jordan. So when you look at someone like a Michael Jordan, a lot of people don't talk about the fact that he played 82 games in a season, like 9 times, And when you look at his career, he played 82 games a season, or 80 games a season, like every single year of his career. I think there was only like maybe 1 or 2 years of his career, with the Bulls anyways, that he didn't play 80 or 82 games. I think one year he played 78, something like that. But that was something that he wanted to do. Were there games that Jordan could have sat out? Absolutely, man. Jordan could have sat out games, man. He could have, been like, oh, I'm dealing with a little soreness right now, so I'm not going to play in this game. Maybe he never worried about his quote unquote numbers or stats, in games and be, oh, maybe I'll sit this game out, in one of those tough games, or, when you're in those dog days of the year in like, February and March, when those games are getting a little grindy out and you're like, oh man, maybe I'll sit out a game. He never did that though. He always played because he knew that people were coming to watch him and people were paying their hard-earned money to come watch him play. So he felt an obligation to go out there and to perform and to be on the court. Now, yeah, maybe, Jordan didn't have a Jordan-esque game every single game, Maybe he didn't, put up 50, 60 points every single game or have some crazy explosion every single game, but the man was out there every single game. So the potential was there. And like I said, people came to see him, not necessarily to see him score 60, but they came to see him because there was one thing about Jordan that you knew was guaranteed. At least once a game, at least, mostly more than that. But at least once a game, he was going to give you some highlight reel play. Guaranteed. Either some crazy, layup switch hands, or he was going to dunk it on somebody, or he was going to give somebody a crazy fake move and get him up in the air and go under and hit the fadeaway. There was going to be some move that the people were going to be like, oh man, I can't believe Mike just did. You were always going to get that with Jordan. And that's because he was out there every single game because he wanted to. And like I said, back in those days, guys took pride. There was a guy like AC Green. This dude was the Iron Man back in the 80s and stuff and into the 90s. the dude played like 1,000 some consecutive games or whatever his record was, and he was known as an Iron Man, AC Green. And this is a guy, AC Green, he wasn't a big time player, right? He's not a Hall of Famer or anything like that, or, a perennial all-star player. But he was a solid role player for championships, and he was a good player to have on your team. He's a kind of a glue guy. And he took pride in that. And he wasn't even, like I said, he wasn't even a big time player, but he took pride in being there every single game, and that's how it was back in the day. Like I said, there was a pride factor there, and there was honor in that, in being available every game and playing every game. Guys, like I said, took pride in that stuff. And that's kind of gone now, where it's almost like they take pride in not playing 82 games so that they can preserve themselves, so that maybe they can play longer, which doesn't make any sense to me, because you have all the advantages of science and medicine in your favor these days, which is going to extend your career, right? If you take certain precautions, if you eat right, if you do certain trainings, things like that, it's going to help to extend your career. Listen, sometimes injuries are going to happen. It doesn't matter what you do. You could never, play 82 games in a season and you could destroy your leg, you know what I'm saying, or destroy your body somehow. It's just the way the game goes sometimes. But these people, like I said, they're taking shortcuts now to try to, I want to play for 15 years, or I want to play for 17 years. Guys didn't think about that back in the day. You know what they thought about back in the day? They thought about winning. They wanted to win. So they were out there putting their bodies on the line. And a lot of those guys from the 70s and the 80s, they weren't making a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? So they were out there putting themselves on the line, putting themselves out there, hustling, diving for loose balls, playing every game, you know what I'm saying? Flying on these crappy planes, driving in these buses, back in the day. These guys would play every single game, man, like it was their last, man. And they said they weren't making a lot of extravagant money, and they weren't, they didn't have a brand to build. They didn't have a shoe deal. They didn't have a Twitter account, and they didn't have, an Instagram page, you know what I'm saying, to try to get people to come and follow them and get fans that way. They had to go on the court and show what they could do on the court. That was how you built up your quote-unquote brand. There was no brand, You had to go out there and play. And if you wasn't available, then no one knew who you were. They would never know who Kawhi Leonard is, man, because the dude ain't played. They would have forgot about this guy, man, because there would have been somebody else to take his mantle. And yeah, Kawhi Leonard is a great player. He's had some great seasons, but the dude, you can't put him in the upper echelon with the all-time greats, man. The dude, like I said, he's mentally soft, man. He's weak. He's out here sitting out games with his knee issue that I don't even think is an issue anymore. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not trying to diagnose anybody. But come on, man, stop it. Other people have came back from a lot more significant injuries, and they came back way faster and shit, man. Even Kevin Durant came back faster from his Achilles injury. This guy's been sitting out for what? Your boys are in the playoffs. You left him hanging? That would never happen with guys back in the day. If you were the leader of that team, you pick anybody from the 80s and 90s, specifically, I'm talking about leader of a team, right? The top guy on that team. They're not doing that. David Robinson is not doing that to the San Antonio Spurs. Karl Malone is not doing that to the Utah Jazz. Hakeem Olajuwon is not doing that to the Houston Rockets. Charles Barkley was not going to be doing that to the 76ers or the Phoenix Suns. Michael Jordan, we damn sure know he wasn't doing it to the Bulls. He didn't do it to the Bulls. You know what I'm saying? Isaiah Thomas wasn't doing that with the Pistons. You know what I'm saying? The dude has a legendary performance on one leg. I mean, that's how you become legendary. Like Michael Jordan could have shut down the flu game, right? But it became legendary because he went out there and performed at a high level. Isaiah Thomas's thing became legendary because he went out there on a hobbled leg and performed at a high level. Willis Reed, right? You think about these kind of things. Even Bill Walton, who had the foot problems, that were very well documented, which basically destroyed his career. There were people that said that Bill Walton would have went down as a top 2 or 3 center of all time if he would have never had those foot injuries. That's what they said about Bill Walton back in them days. But the fact that he had the foot injuries, he didn't retire from that. Yeah, he was never going to be the same Bill Walton, but he kept playing, though. He played through pain. Larry Bird never gave up on the Celtics, right? The dude played in excruciating back pain for years. For years he dealt with that instead of shutting it down years prior or being like, oh, let me take half this season off so I can, try to extend my career. They wanted to win. It was about winning now in your prime when your career is there. Try to take advantage because like you said, you never know. It could be your last season. It could be your last game. So you go out there and you give it everything you got, man, and you damn sure don't leave your teammates hanging out there. You know what I'm saying? That's like I said, that's the weak mentality right there. But those guys would never do that, man. Magic Johnson wasn't going to do that. Clyde Drexler wasn't going to do that to the Portland Trail Blazers. You know what I'm saying? Sean Kemp and Gary Payne weren't going to do that to the Sonics. You know, they weren't just not going to be there or take games off to rest or take games off to protect themselves, whatever the case may be. Dominique Wilkins wasn't going to do that to the Hawks. Dominique Wilkins tore his Achilles and came right back. You know what I'm saying? He didn't take off and disappear. You know, these guys weren't doing those kind of things, man. They stayed, man, and they represented the city, right? Not only the team, they represented the city, right? When those guys I mentioned, they were synonymous with those towns, with those teams. You know, that's what you had, right? So, in conclusion, this is a problem right now in the NBA with guys not playing 82 games and kind of downplaying it. And that's why I believe a lot of the all-time greats from back in the days, even in the early 2000s, are mentally tougher and they should be valued more because, like I said, they put it on the line and they played through injuries and they played through different circumstances, you know, that they had to deal with. So I think that's a big deal right now. Tell me what you guys think. Click the like button. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Sports and Fitness Rants. You guys have a good one.